Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Voice of Adoptees, which brings together diverse and unique voices from around the world to share their stories. If you like today's episode, remember to give us a like, subscribe, and leave a review. Here's your host, David Shunk.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Voices of Adoptees. This is episode 1. This is going to be an ongoing podcast where we're going to bring to you people from around the world who want to talk and share their stories about being adopted. For our very first episode, we have our number one first guest, Anna. We'd like to welcome her to the podcast, and she's going to discuss about what adoption means to her and everything associated to it. So let's dive in. Anna, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Anna, tell us about yourself.
So I grew up in Southern Maryland, and that's where I live, but I was born in Moscow, Russia. And then I was adopted at 4 years old. I just turned 4, just a couple months after, and then I've lived in the United States ever since.
Okay, that's great. Do you remember much about Russia?
I do. I would say not the good stuff. So when I was born, they sent me to an orphanage, and I lived in the orphanage for about almost pretty much 4 years, but I can only remember the bad things about the orphanage. So,
Would you like to talk about the bad things, or would you rather not?
I mean, it doesn't bother me anymore, but I mean, just the biggest thing that it just kind of like nowadays it's still traumatizing. So like I'm very claustrophobic. So like when you got in trouble, they would lock you in a closet if you got in trouble. So like nowadays I can't like play hide and seek. Or when I was little, I could never play hide and seek because I just get claustrophobic. So I know we were never allowed outside. So I remember leaving the orphanage when I was adopted and um looking outside of like the world, and I was like, oh my gosh. So being able to see that, and then eating, like we were only allowed to have like 5 minutes to eat, so that was a pretty big thing if like food was very scarce. So
Wow. Wow, geez, I was adopted at age 2, and I don't really remember much, but that sounds traumatizing.
yeah.
Hopefully one day you'll be able to maybe play hide and seek with your future kids. Who knows? Um, so, how about you talk to us about, I mean, right now, obviously in the world, in current events, there's a huge thing in Russia going on right now.
Mhm.
The unfortunate war in Ukraine. And do you have any input or comment about the current situation and how being adopted from Russia, who is currently the aggressor, does that make you feel troubled or ashamed from being from Russia? I can certainly tell you that I'm not happy about it, but I'd like to hear what you have to say.
So I mean, I'm not really happy about it either. I'm not really kind of very like into it just because I know I have like friends that talk about it all the time, and I try not to like, I know a lot of people get very like, oh, you're from Russia, you're a bad person, or and I'm like, oh, I'm really not. I've never been to like besides me when I was little. So I try not to talk about it, but it's definitely saddening that people have those kind of views on those people because we have there now that I've been like talking to a lot of Russian people, and there's actually a lot of Ukrainians in America, and it's just sad. It's just sad to be able to be like nobody really knows what's really going on over there except for the people that has family or just know what's over there, and it's a different lifestyle, and so it's definitely sad, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. Let's talk about your childhood, for example. Let's dive into that. Tell us about what it was like being raised in the United States, your adopted family, any fun memories, uh, any memories you don't want to remember, anything that comes to mind. Let's dive into that. Let's talk about it. So tell us about your childhood.
So I actually had a pretty good a pretty good childhood. So my adoptive parents, they're very loving. I grew up with two older siblings. So my parents that I have, my adopted parents, they were older. So when they adopted me, so my adopted brother and sister, they're actually 20 years older than me. So growing up with older siblings, it was nice to have um that kind of relationship, but it was also kind of hard as growing up, never able to share like a close age relationship with them, like being able to do the same stuff like, oh, um, but like childhood, like it was great. I mean, it's just like a normal childhood that anybody else would probably just have. I went on lots of trips. Got to see so a lot of my, like, grandparents were across the world, not across the world, but, they lived up, like, in New York, Texas, like, all over the place, so we definitely traveled a lot to go see, family, and that was a big thing for me is we had a big family, so family meetings and holidays were huge and, just like I guess a normal, I guess, family childhood. A lot of people said when I was growing up that I actually looked like my adopted parents. Like
Yeah.
they didn't even think that I was adopted. They're like, you just fit right in. So, which was actually pretty special. So,
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Similar story with me. My adopted mother and her entire family is from Germany and Russia. So skin color wise, we looked pretty much the same, and everyone thought I was the mama's boy, and no one had
uh,
it. But then you look at my dad, and he's a Midwestern from Ohio, blue eye, just not even close. Uh,
yeah.
um, so what age did you start to talk about or think about, like, personally, hey, I'm from another country, I'm adopted, and about what age did you actually, you know, figure out what that really means to be adopted?
So I'm not exactly sure exactly what age, but I definitely know in middle school, sometime in middle school, I did ask. So I knew when I was little that I was like as soon as I was able to understand, like my parents were very open about it. Like you're from Russia, they always showed me pictures that they had. They always talked about it. But in middle schools, when I really like I was trying to find myself, identity and figure who I am and fit in. But I definitely asked my parents about like, hey, like, who are my parents or why am I this way? And, so they talked about it a little bit more and stuff like that. So but it was truly after I graduated high school, I started, like, really kinda, like, reaching out, and I only know from what my parents said and what I have, like, paperwork-wise, and, I could go only from there, and the story that I've known is just that they didn't want me. And so
Yeah, it's
searching for
very common for a lot of people over
yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, and, like, searching, like, knowing that stuff, I'm just like it just makes me very, like, extra blessed that, I was adopted and, a family wanted me and, um, but, I never really had high hopes to look for them. Like, I know a biggest thing is, like, I wanna know why I am the way I am, and if I any like, growing older, now I'm like, "Okay, do I have any medical things that I need to worry about?" And that was a big issue too because I have some medical issues that I'm going through, so I was like, is this genetic or so that was a big thing, but when looking up for them, I never like I'm like, I always thought the worst possibility, like, they're not alive or they just want nothing to do with me, and that was okay with me. It was hard at first, but if I never found them or when it was gonna be okay because I still have, my family I've, like, grown up with. I just keep going on with that, so
Yeah, wow. Well, I get you. I totally understand you with the whole medical history side. That's so important. And,
Mhm.
being adopted, you understand how frustrating it is growing up, how every time you go to a new doctor, they say, "What's your family history?" And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah, I'm
like, "What
like,
do you have high blood pressure? Maybe. Do you have high cholesterol? Sounds good. Put it down. I don't know."
yeah, I
I
have no
mean,
idea.
yeah. Wow. So it's funny that you mentioned that you started to really actively think about it toward the end of high school, you said, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's again, same with me. It's just out of coincidence. I don't, maybe it's just coincidence, who knows? But it's interesting. And, similar story with growing up, and it was always like in my head. Like I
Yeah.
knew I was adopted, but I didn't make it a big deal. I didn't really think about it because, I think my story in some ways is similar to yours. We grew up in a loving environment and loving parents, and
Mhm.
that's really kind of what just children need and they want. And
Yeah.
if you get enough of that, I mean, you can kind of forget sometimes you're even adopted. I mean, I didn't dwell on it
Mhm.
as much.
Yeah,
Every
exactly.
yeah, everyone's story is different, absolutely. Um, so let's talk about after high school. You're getting older, you start to get more interested in adoption. Tell us what next steps you kind of went toward that discovery.
So, um, one thing that was like pretty big for me is just a lot of people, more people that really got to know me, they would ask me the biggest question is, would you ever go back? Would you want to go find your family? That was like a big question. And like they kept asking me, and I was like, and I would always say, yeah, but like, I just wanna know where I come from, and then it would just dawn on me and dwell, and I'd be like, "No, you know what? Let me go look for them." So, I never like, same thing, I'd go and, in the thought process, I'm like, "I'm not gonna get my hopes up, I'll just think the worst possibility just so I don't get my hopes up." So, the biggest thing is I would go so I have my name and I have my parents' name. So that's the only information I had at the moment. So I would like look on Instagram or Facebook and just look up their names and see if they're on Facebook, Instagram, because there's a lot of people out there and I didn't really get any matches. So I was like, okay. So then I did ancestry.com. I did that and then I did a 23andMe cuz and a lot of that was more of, like, genetics, but then to see if there was, like, a family tree, and so it came back as 99%, like, from Moscow, Russia, and maybe 1, I think it was, like, from Finland or something, 1%. So I was like,
That's
"Well, definitely Russian."
It's funny you say that. I pretty much have the same results, and I think I was like 1% Jewish actually,
Oh,
1%,
wow.
but Finnish too. So, but don't worry, I did 23andMe, and unfortunately, we're not cousins. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Darn, no, I'm just kidding. Um, but yeah, and so then I was like, okay, well, there was a lot of people matching, but it was all like 3rd, 4th, 5th cousin. I was like, okay, that's not gonna help me any. So I would just keep looking on Facebook, and then I finally found Russian Adoptees. Like I found that group, and I found another couple like groups on Facebook. A Search Squad. That was a big one. Search Squad. So I went on there first and I didn't really get anything, like nobody really responded to me until I went on to Russian Adoptees and I just said, "Hey guys, I just want to let you know like this is my information, if anybody knows." And this was just like last year too. So this was after college. So I graduated in high school from 2014 and then I graduated college 2018. So this was just recently. Like
Okay, so you graduated high school 2014
yeah,
and college
4 years after
2000.
that.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, math.
No, it's okay.
So yeah, you are a year younger than me, 1 year younger than me. Yeah, I think so. Because wait, no, I think I just said that all wrong. No, disregard. Never mind. I graduated high school 2013, college 2017 for me. So
Okay, so then yeah, you're a year older, yeah. Um,
1 year.
yeah. But yeah, and I just like same thing like I said earlier, I just put my information out there didn't have my biggest hopes, and this girl actually responded, and I don't remember her name at the top of my mind, but she responded and she said, "Hey, like I hope you're not like upset with me like finding your information, but she found my mom on so and I didn't know anything about this, but I guess there's Russian website called OK .ru, and then there's another one, but I had no idea until recently. Like
Yeah,
if I knew
it's
that,
VK is the other one you're thinking
yeah,
of.
VK, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and I knew nothing about that, and I wish I did a little bit earlier, but it's totally okay. And she was like, "I found your information," and and I was like, "That is crazy." And so it was a lot at first because I was like, "I don't know if this is true because it could have been a spam." Like, I never know. Like, I'm very weary about stuff on social media sometimes. So I like it took me a while to like really be like, is this a spam or but
Reminds me of the SNL episode of think Donald the whole when Trump was president, but that's we're not even talking about that. But there's a scene on SNL where they have the CNN guy locked in a cage at like a courtroom and he's screaming to the press like I'm not fake news. Never mind. So I don't know
yeah.
why it just popped in my head, but I totally get about the whole spam thing. And you got to look out and make sure people who are you're trusting people with your information, and you
Yeah,
really
exactly.
don't know who they are. And when I did my search, I used a gentleman who unfortunately passed away recently. It's really sad, but he was a very, really nice guy. He was a British resident. He grew up
Mm.
in Britain. He grew up in London, actually. He actually served as an advisor to Margaret Thatcher back in the day, and he
Wow.
actually moved to Russia, married a Russian girl, a Russian woman in my city, Smolensk. Go figure. So, but
Wow.
it was weird because when I did this search, I was thinking, out of all people, a British guy is going to search for my information. Like something about
Right,
that
yeah.
just seemed kind of odd, but his name is Tony. He was an amazing guy, amazing individual. He touched the lives of thousands, and
Aw.
it was crazy, but that's great. Anyway, so back to your story. So you got this information. Um, you typed in their names. You saw these pictures, I assume, right, for the first time of what they looked like. What
Yeah.
what's the first word, or what's the first thing that came to your mind when you saw the first photo of one of them?
Um, well, so like a big thing that kept going in my mind is like what like it was like why like I said earlier, why do I look the way I do? And so I'm like, what is the resemblance? Like, does this look like me? Because I mean, I don't look at myself every day. You know what I mean? So other people do. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I can kind of see it and stuff like that. So I actually told one of my really good friends, I was like, hey, like that was the first thing I did. I said, what do you think this looks like? Like, I didn't even tell her the story behind it. I said, what does this lady look like? And they were like, oh my gosh, that looks like you. And I was like, okay, story sold. Like, and I did it to a couple of my close friends. I was like, okay, same thing. Who does this look like? Or, does this lady look like somebody? They're like, oh my gosh, they look like you. And I was like, okay, all right. Cause they see me every day. And, I'm like, I mean, I see myself obviously, and I know what I look like, but it's different from somebody that looks at you.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that really got me first. And then as soon as they said that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. Like it's real, and she's alive, and that it was just a lot coming in, and I was like, oh man. And the lady that helped me find her, she was like, she sent me all these. So she basically kind of screenshotted all the photos, sent to and be like, this is what's on her profile, like, this is the family, da da da. And she was like, I can help you, you know, send out a message if you're ready to reach out, like, no rush, because I know this is a lot. And I was like, very a lot. It took me about a week to actually like go through and
Process all
yeah,
that new
process it
information.
before I was like, okay, I'm ready. Like, I would love for you to like message her. Or
Yeah.
she didn't message, she sent me stuff because and she's in Russian too. So I'm like, I know nothing in Russian. So
You,
she
do
helped
you know
me.
any simple phrases or anything?
So I'm working on it now.
Da.
Um, but the biggest thing is my name. And so in the orphanage, going to the bathroom, those were those were the big words. So
Yeah.
I knew everybody asked me that like before everything, and I was like, I only know my name and like the bathroom words because those were the most important things to do. So
Yep. Yep.
so but
Now,
now I do know more. So
okay. So, wow. Yeah. Do you happen to know, and this is kind of a crazy question, maybe you remember or you don't. Do you remember what time you got that information at? What time of day it was when you
it
first saw those photos?
it was around like the late afternoon, so around like 3, 4, 5 o'clock. So
Pretty funny that you would remember. See, adoptees, we remember those small details that people who
yeah,
weren't adopted take for granted. I mean, if you think about it, it blows my mind to really just think, if like, for someone else who isn't adopted, to process the fact that we're seeing ourselves for the first time in another human being who looks
yeah,
like us. For the years that we grew up, like you said, maybe we had it a bit different because we didn't overthink it as much in terms of
hmm,
identity, and oh, I don't have my mom's hair or eyes or dimples or
hmm,
whatever. But for the first time to have a photo of someone you're actually blood related to, it's like you're
yeah,
almost staring at yourself in a way, right in the face. And
yeah,
you freeze for a moment and you just think like, whoa, is this really me? Like, is this happening?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
wow, that's incredible. So let's keep going on that. I guess the next step, you've got this information, you see what they look like. How long did it take you to be ready for that first introductory like message and letter to the family? And if you don't mind sharing, what did you want to tell them about yourself?
Yeah, so it like I said earlier, it took me about a week to really process it, and I was like, okay, I'm ready. Like, what do I say? So she sent me like a whole thing in Russian and like what it said, and basically I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was just saying, hey, this is who I am, this is what has happened, like here's, I was born this date, my name, and I would love for you to respond, and you don't have to, but would love to know any information, and you know stuff like that. So she sent that to me, and I was like, okay, I'll send it. So she sent, but I had to get okay. So I was like really skeptical. Like I said earlier, I was skeptical. I was like, is this a legit website? But I did my research, and it's a pretty legit website. So I made it, and I sent her the message, and so you can tell when they've read it. And so the next day I'm like, I'm anxious. Like I don't get any sleep. I'm like, oh my gosh. And the time is different too over there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's 7 hours difference from here to over there. So I'm like, oh my goodness, like I think I sent it that night. So they were still, I think, asleep or something like that. So the next day, like, nothing's happened, and so until later that night, and, it says that she read it, and I'm like, "Okay, well, let her process it," stuff like that, and so, um, I messaged the other girl. I was like, "Hey, she saw it, like, how long do you think? I'm just very anxious, like, I don't expect something to come back right away, but is there anything I need to know or say extra?" So she's like, just wait it out and see, she may not want anything. And in my mind, I was like, she probably doesn't want anything to do with me. And so then the next day following it, I get this message from this another person from OK. And it's um it was this like it there was no picture on the OK. It was just like, is this Anya or something like that. Like, it was asking if this was me, and I was like, "Yes, this is me. Who are you?" And so it had my last name, like, in Russian, but I don't remember the first, like, I know who it was. It was, like, Pavel or somebody, but, and I was like, "I don't know who this is." And so I messaged the lady. I was like, "Hey, I just got this random text, like, who do you think it could be? Like, I'm kinda nervous because I was like anything, like especially right now with the whole war going through, and I know this sounds bad, but I was like, I just don't want to get in trouble with anything, or so I was kind of like skeptical. I was like, I just don't want, you know. So and she's like, it could be the father, it could be the like brother. So she was telling me that it looks like she has two sons, like before. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have two brothers. That's amazing. And the father and stuff like that. So, and that's how I found out through the pictures.
Right.
Well, sort of. She thought that could have been their kids. So, um, anyway, so I get this message and then I was like, yeah, this is me, who are you? And then, um, they're like, this is, like they said his name. And I was like, um, if this is really you, I can't believe this is actually happening. And I was like, oh, just tell me who you are. And they're like, I'm your brother. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, and so past tense, like my brother lives with my mother. So that's how he found out. And he's like, mother saw your message, but she is like, not able to speak right now because we're just so in shock that you're alive and like well and like I can't believe this is you, like oh my goodness, like just like sending all this stuff. And um so that brother knows English a little bit, so he was at first he was writing in Russian, and I just was like, I'm not really good at Russian, and he's like, okay, I can like write in English. And then we transferred over to Instagram, and then because it was easier through there, and then we transferred over to WhatsApp, and then found out that I had another older brother. And so he was like, yeah, like I learned a lot of things through my younger brother. And then I get another message from the older brother and was like, oh my gosh, is this really you? And I was like, yeah. And it's been about a couple days and stuff, and I still haven't heard from the mother. So I was like, you know what, that's fine. She could take her time. But I was getting to know like the older brother and the younger brother, um, a lot. They were just talking about like, oh my gosh, it's like really you. And so I think it was the third day after I was messaging them, they asked to FaceTime me. And I was like, oh my gosh,
Oh, I
like
bet that
they were
was
just
a heart
so,
stop
yeah,
moment right there.
yeah, they were so like, "Oh, I would love to see you." Like, I was sending them obviously pictures and stuff, but they're like, I would love to. So I remember the time I opened the camera,
Yep.
and I'm telling you, like, I've never seen, and I don't want this to sound really, I don't want this to sound bad, but I've never seen a guy cry so much in their life.
Oh,
Like, I know that's like here in the US, like guys are like manly, and they don't
oh,
show emotion.
no, you
But
know what?
so
I think that's all made up. Every guy's emotional. They just don't want to admit it.
they don't want to admit it or show it. But like it was so heartbreaking watching them cry. I mean, we're all crying at the same time, but like
Well, yeah. Yep,
it
I
was,
can relate. Yep.
yeah, we were just all crying. We couldn't get any words out. And so, like, for a while they were crying and they were asking me about my story and what happened. And every time I tried to tell them, they would just cry even more because my story and their story about the whole situation was different, which is something that I'm learning really hard. Like it's hard to process right now, but still going through it at the moment. But a lot of things are different from both sides, and it's been hard for them to understand and me to understand, and that's why it's just still very emotional. So and then about a week later, my mother, she messaged back and she was like, I can't believe it's you. Like, I'm so sorry about like everything, and I hope you talk to me. And like I'm not gonna like, I just want to know them. So there's no hard feelings. Like I it's, I'm very, very blessed that I got adopted and I'm alive, and I hear people's story, and it makes me even more blessed because there's other Russian adoptees that don't even have their family that's not even alive, or their parents don't even want them, and I have like a whole family that's together, and they want to talk to me and get to know me. So it's like the balance of like, oh, why did this happen to me? But I'm still very blessed, that I'm still alive and stuff. So But yeah, we FaceTime probably once every 2 weeks and, get to talk and
Do you,
stuff like
do you
that. So
still keep that up? You still doing that every 2 weeks?
yeah.
Wow. So how many years have you been in contact with them so far? About 4, 5?
Oh no, I just found them past November.
Oh.
Like, yeah, it's been 4 months.
Oh, my bad. I thought, never mind. I was trying to do the math from college and never mind.
Oh, I'm so
Forget
sorry.
anything I just said.
Yeah, I didn't do that right. Yeah. So in
So
November,
this is still pretty recent.
very recent.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay. Well, that's amazing. Well, I found my family 10 years ago. So I'll give
Wow.
you some wisdom. You're in the honeymoon phase, all right? Think about it as a relationship, all right? You're in the phase where
Yeah.
everything's dandy, it's amazing. But I will say, just as things progress, my big thing I tell everyone is don't have expectations.
Yeah.
Don't expect anything, especially when
Yeah.
you're doing a search, because you may not be as lucky as you were, or I was, or someone
Mhm.
else.
Yeah.
Like you just mentioned, other people will do a search and they find out their family members passed away and they won't get any answers ever. And
Yeah.
it's hard. I mean,
Mhm.
I am more connected with my um, mother's side of the family. I actually recently found out I have a cousin that's related to me through my Russian family that actually moved to the United States,
Wow.
who lives in Florida, speaks English, and I talk to her every day, and
Wow.
it's unbelievable. Yeah, but so you're in a good phase right now. You're learning a lot, which is great. Um, but as things progress, don't be alarmed that sometimes the stories might get mixed up, or you're going to hear information that was said years ago that they changed a little bit. It's hard and it's an ongoing thing being adopted. The reality is
Yeah.
we may never actually know the 100% truth. Some of us will,
Yeah.
some of us won't, and you might have to be okay with that, and accepting that's really hard.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you're taking it pretty well. But um, I guess if what advice would you have for people who want to find their family? What would you tell them?
Um, I guess kind of what we just kind of, I guess, said. Um, don't really. So my biggest thing when going through this is not getting the hopes up because I I know if I got my hopes up and I really didn't find anything that I'd probably be really sad and like probably more sad that I didn't find anything than even knowing about the whole situation. So going in with more of like, you know, I guess a positive note saying, even though I didn't find anything, I'm very blessed that I have the life that I have. So like for me, um, at the orphanage, like they kick you out when you're 16 and you have to, find your own, figure it out. So that could have happened or um, just it I always say I guess it could be worse. So, um I guess just keeping the thought of being positive about, the life you actually have. So, and um if you like I said, if you don't find anything, I guess connecting with others too. Like that's a good I know that's helped me a lot with even though you didn't find anything, you could find something through somebody else.
Right.
So,
And it's the whole process and the emotional wear and tear it does on someone going through that process. And it helps when you
yeah.
have people that understand and can relate to it. That's the
Yeah,
one thing I found out, which is really hard, is when part of you speak of the Russian Adoptees Facebook group. I made that group actually when I was in my first year of college on November 13th or 20th, 26th, 13th, something around November of 2013. I made it because I met three other Russian girls who were nearby my college. I actually went to a college right overlapping my campus. So I went to college up in Burlington, Vermont at Champlain College. We had University of Vermont's campus overlap ours. They had a Russian major and a Russian department of language and all that. So it was cool
oh,
because
wow,
they
that's
had a
so
lot
cool.
of resources I ended up actually using to help translate stuff. So they helped me out a lot. But anyway, so these three Russian women and myself, we were all sitting around chatting. And I said, this is amazing. Like, this is the first time I actually sat down with just three Russian adoptees all at the same time. And we all talked about
Wow.
where we were from, our stories, and and I thought this is amazing. If only there were other people like this out
Right.
there. And from there we made this little Facebook page, and it grew to the largest one about Russian adoptees on Facebook. And we welcome everyone adopted from Russia and former Soviet uh, countries, of course. But back to your point about, no expectations and all that. I think that's important to remember. I know you don't want to sound negative saying that, because there's a lot of positives from finding your family.
Right, absolutely.
Right. If you had one thing that you would do differently the next time around, would you do anything, or would you change anything, or would you do exactly the same thing in terms of how you would want to reach out? Or are you happy looking back on the first message you sent? And now it's pretty deep questions, I know, but if you had any thought about that, do you think you were
Hmm.
saying the right thing? Were you taking people's advice? Were you just going on Google and thinking about it? Honestly, you can be honest.
I think I honestly feel like the whole situation, how it happened with me, I think everything happened like at a perfect time. Like not at perfect timing, but like how it happened was perfect. Like I wasn't really looking, but I just put myself out there and I was in a pretty good situation. Well, I wasn't really in a perfect situation, but I don't think I said anything different. I know now, like, I'm kind of step on their toes a little bit about like asking and more information. If anything, I think I kind of wish I did it a little bit sooner. Um, and I know probably a lot of people are going to say that just because then I feel like I would be able to have more time to, you know, get to know them more because my Russian family is a little bit older. So, and even my adopted parents, they're older too. So I know there's like a part of me that's like, oh, I missed a lot on that. And I would love to, be able to do this or do that. Or like my Russian brother just turned 30 actually a couple of days ago. And so I don't know. It's just, I guess, but as an adoptee and just now finding your family, you miss all those years, so you're gonna miss years anyways. So, um, yeah, I think in my perspective, everything went pretty good. Like I said, in my head, I just kind of wish I did it sooner. Um, but I feel like it being younger, I wasn't as mature and probably wouldn't have taken it the same way as I did now. So it was probably best for me to wait till I was older. So
Yeah, that's understandable. But that's some really great advice. Um, you know, do you would you say that you have anything that you regret about the search process, going through the search? Because, some adoptees have um, some negative feelings toward uh, their home country where they're from.
mhm.
The war isn't helping, that's for sure. But,
Yeah.
some of them blame their biological families for situations that they might be in nowadays. But like you said before, you seem like you were, treated well and raised well and had a loving, family. And is there any regrets about anything being adopted that you wish, were a little different? I mean, some people think being adopted was lost time with another family, so to speak.
Yeah. So
Has
like,
that ever crossed your mind?
and yeah, just kind of like I said earlier, it's like, oh, well, I missed all those years. But I know a biggest thing, especially for like my adoptive family. So back in, like I said earlier, in my middle school years, I thought about looking them up and I talked to my family, and it's definitely hard for them because you're one of their child. Like even though they're not blood related, they are still your child. So um I think I remember asking them when I was younger, and they were like, "You don't love us anymore," or, "You want them," and, it's definitely hard, and so and I think that's, like, a big thing that I kinda do regret asking at a like, 'cause I don't want them to feel like they're not wanted because they're obviously my number 1 family, even though, like, my biological, like, blood related, like, I don't want them to ever feel like I'm choosing them over, my actual biological family, so, um,
Right.
but
It's a good point you just mentioned about that. If we could dive into that real quick.
mhm,
Um, do you have any advice for people, and I'll give my 2 cents after. How do you go about managing that relationship of now all of a sudden you have 2 families? You have
mhm,
a family in Russia that you recently connected with, and you have your
mhm,
family in the United States, which you grew up with. Now, sometimes adoptive parents can be very um, concerned, let's put it that way,
yeah,
that their child is reaching out to their biological family. And honestly, in some situations, jealousy could arise.
oh, yep,
Some mean comments may be said. They might feel threatened. They
mhm,
might get in protection mode, like, well, I
oh, yeah,
raised you, how dare you want to find this other people, what they did to you, etc. How do
mhm.
you manage that difficult relationship between the two sides?
So, I remember the biggest thing is just always reminding them, um, that, like, they're my number 1 family and how blessed I am to have them, and, like, I always reiterate that, like, you know, they're I will always love them more than, not in a bad way, but, like, I will always love them more than my biological family only because I've, grown up with them. I can never have that same bond as I would ever with my biological parents. So I always reiterate that, but I do remember when I did tell him, I was like, the biggest thing that I was very nervous. I was, because knowing from what I said when I was in middle school till now, I was like, "Oh my gosh, they're gonna say the same thing. They don't want anything to do with me. They're like, go back to Russia, da da da." So I was like, I just wanted to let y'all know, the biggest reason, and I think, and this is why I think it was a good timing for me to find them when I did, is because of my medical history. And my biggest thing that I pointed out was like, I just need to know what's wrong, like why I am the way I am. I need to know my medical history. And so they really kind of understood, like, that's very important, um, for me, because that's something that they'll never be able to tell me, or to be able to, as much as they want to, they just can't. Genetically and physically, they just can't.
Yeah,
So
that you can't argue with science on that one.
exactly, as much as they want to, but so that was a big thing I reiterated them, and, I was like, "It's just for like, I'm never gonna," and so speaking with them, they do know that I, talk to them and stuff like that. I don't talk to them a lot, and I always reiterate, I don't talk to them. So if I do talk to them, I talk to more of my adopted parents more than I do my biological parents. And that, learning where I come from, just heritage. It's just like learning a history class, Um, when I talk to them, like, you guys, you knew where you grew up and your heritage, and you knew that. And, as much as I want to relate to that and share that, I want to be able to do that for myself. So now I get to learn, where I come from, my grandparents, my ancestries, and speaking Russian. And I just always, all I've known is my Russian name. And so now to be able to speak it, some of it, not the best, it's just it's something that makes me unique and different, and it makes me feel good about it, so
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really great. Now, if we could go on the flip side of that, what advice would you give to an adoptive parent that was listening right now, and maybe they are wondering, hey, my child is all of a sudden asking questions and wants to do a search, and I just want to I want to make sure that they don't forget me. How can you reassure them that we won't forget them?
Um, my biggest thing would just say, just listen. Just listen to what they have to say and why they want to do it in the first place. Because it's just like from an adoptee to adoptee, like n- nobody's it's hard to understand our point of view. Like we grew up with parents, since birth, like not like us, but just normal children. They get to grow up and you know from from birth and be able to share those like moments of, I held you in my arm, or and some do, some I get adopted from birth. There's different stories, but um I would just my advice is just listen to where they're coming from, and why they feel the way they do, and you know they're not gonna ever love love them more. Like from my point of view, there's just it's not, because you've grown up with them, and you share more. You know, from my point of view, it's that you guys rescued us. So it's a huge deal, and so it's something that we can never like repay them for. So I know that
Right,
sounds
right. No,
silly,
I
but
know. Yeah, absolutely. Um,
yeah.
no, that's really great advice, and I'm sure they're going to love to hear that. I was actually debating asking my own adoptive mother to maybe be interviewed by me. I think that would be pretty priceless. I mean, we ended up going back to Russia. So we had an
Um,
experience to go see the orphanage and meet my family together. Something that bonded us for life, of course. Now, my next question, we'll be wrapping up soon. Don't worry, I promise. Um, have you ever thought about going back?
I have.
And do you
Um,
want to?
I do. So that was like when I growing up, that was a huge thing that a lot of people asked me, and they were like, "Do you want to go back?" I have pictures of me in the orphanage, and pictures of me in like downtown Russia, and I think it's the coolest thing ever. And I think going back, I know this might sound silly, but I think it would really bring back memories. Like I could like visually be able to see, like I get like dreams about things happening in Russia. Like it's just recurring things. But I feel like if I went to go over, it would be more surreal, and it's almost like filling in a missing piece that I've always been trying to fill. And now that I've known my parents and my brother and my Russian family, I think, you know, being able to now go visit them and meet them in person would be another thing. Now, it would be hard. So before I knew them, people would ask me, be like, well, what would you do over there? Would you go find them? And I'd be like, well, I wouldn't know what to say, but now obviously I would. But I would love to go over there. It would take me some time, and I've actually looked into um how to do it, like what would I need to prepare myself to go over there, and
And all
what I need.
the legal side of it, that you are still a
Exactly.
citizen of Russia and you have to go
Yeah.
on their passport. For anyone that's
Mhm.
listening or going to listen, again, I am going to reiterate this a million times, is that Russian law clearly states if you are born on Russian soil, you are a citizen in their eyes. Remember that. There are people that might say you can travel on a US visa. That's really shady because legally that's not how it works. You have to leave the United States as a US citizen and enter Russia as a Russian
And
citizen.
yeah, and
Uh,
that's a lot that I've seen online when looking it up. So you have to at least and I've even asked my Russian family. I was like, "Hey, like, what's the process?" Because they always keep asking, "Oh, when are you gonna come visit?" And I'm like, "Okay, it's gonna take some time," but they were talking me through about it, and having a USR um, travel thing, and then I have a Russian passport from when I was little, so I still have like all that stuff. So, but yeah, the answer is yes. I would love to go.
Absolutely. Now, favorite time of year? Do you have a time of year you'd want to go? Winter? I heard it's
Uh,
really nice in
uh,
Russia during the wintertime.
I am not a fan of the cold anymore. As I get older, I am not a fan of the cold. When I was little, I was like, yeah, I'm from Russia. I can handle the cold. I love it. And now I'm just like, no, I want the warmth. I want to feel the sun on my skin. So,
Yeah,
definitely into summertime.
yeah, definitely. Well, that's fantastic. Um, Couple last things before we wrap up. How about we just talk about where you are in life right now? Like, what are you doing? You said you went to college. What did you study? What do you want to do with your life? Give me the 5-year plan.
So right now, so I went to college in Kentucky. I grew up in Maryland, but I went to college in Kentucky. I studied equine management. I'm a very big horse. You can call me horse crazy girl, whatever. But I'm actually right now, I'm a full-time horse trainer, horse lesson trainer. I train horses, I teach lessons, I help manage a barn of over 20 horses. Um, I do showing. I'm very big into eventing. My long-term goal is to go to the Olympics. So if you ever see me out there in a couple years, actually not a couple years, it'll probably be like over like 8 years, but my eventual goal is to be in the Olympics. So,
That's awesome. Well,
um,
remember us little people, and remember to give
yeah,
me a free ticket. All right.
yeah,
That'd
absolutely.
be amazing. So before I wrap it up, is there any last thing you'd like to say? Because I have a final question for you, but I'm just going to give you time to say anything else you'd like to that we didn't touch on, or that's important to you that you want to share to make sure that we're hearing it from you.
Yeah. I have a couple. One, thank you for making Russian adoptees because without your adoptees group, I would probably not be in this situation right now
Well,
because that's how I found
I appreciate that. And for anyone listening, that's not scripted. I didn't pay her to say that. That's 100% honest. I'm
it
being
is. It
100% honest.
totally
No
is.
payment whatsoever. Thank you. You can continue. Sorry. Just
No,
want to make
you're
that
good.
clear.
And just I don't want to be all like sentimental or like sappy, but don't be I don't know, be proud of being adopted because I know being younger, it's try I was not the best at fitting in, and so because I was adopted and stuff like that, I was bullied when I was younger. So, you know, it was hard to like come out and be like, yeah, I was proud of being adopted. I just wanted to fit in and be like everybody else. But growing up, it's awesome being able to be unique and different. So be proud of being adopted, be proud of your story. Um, not even if, things don't turn out the way you are, you're still your story still makes a difference. So, um, yeah, be proud.
Be proud. I like that. Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you this evening. You've done a fantastic job, and for episode 1, I that was pretty amazing. So they're only going to get
Yeah.
better, and I think that's the next person's going to have a big couple of shoes to fill on that one right there. So everyone, really appreciate you listening. Anna, you were fantastic. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And folks, remember, we're going to be trying to release episodes every Wednesday. You can tune in. We're going to be trying to do them live eventually. More updates to follow. Social media will be announced shortly. And if you would like to be a guest on this, please do go to our website at www.voicesofadoptees.com. And remember that, as Anna said, be proud of who you are. I think that couldn't have been said any better. Voices of Adoptees. Who am I?
Thanks for listening to Voice of Adoptees. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave a review. See you next time.